London, 1889. The carriage wheels echo through fog-thick streets. Inside, a black man in formal robes grips a letter. His hands are steady, but his jaw is clenched. Outside the window, white faces stare, some with curiosity, others with pure hatred. The carriage stops. Buckingham Palace looms ahead like a stone fortress. A guard approaches. Sir William Conrad Reeves? He steps out, straightens his collar, takes a breath. What happens in the next 60 minutes will shatter every rule the British Empire ever made about race, power, and who gets to be called Sir. But here's the part that'll make your blood boil. History erased him on purpose. You've probably never heard that name. Sir William Conrad Reeves, the first black British knight ever knighted on British soil. Not in the 1900s, not after civil rights movements, not during some progressive era. While America was deep in Jim Crow, while the British Empire controlled a quarter of the planet, while racial science was being taught in universities to justify white supremacy, one black man walked into the Queen's palace and walked out with a knighthood. And then he disappeared from every history book, every textbook, every story about British knighthood. Gone, like he never existed. You're about to find out why they erased him, and trust me, the reason will make you furious. Let's rewind. Barbados, 1839. Slavery had just been abolished in the British Caribbean 5 years earlier. But let's be real. Freedom was a word on paper, nothing more. Black people were free in name only. No land, no money, no rights. The plantations still stood, the overseers still carried whips, the same white families still owned everything. This was the world William Conrad Reeves was born into. His father, a poor black man scraping by in a society designed to crush him. His mother, a woman who probably known slavery herself, or her parents had. William grew up surrounded by the ghosts of chains. The sugarcane fields stretched for miles, the mansions of white plantation owners sat on hills like thrones, and every single day the message was clear. You are nothing, you will always be nothing. But William's mother told him something different. She told him, you can read. And in 1839 Barbados, that was a radical act. Because education was the one thing they couldn't take from you, the one weapon they couldn't see. So William read everything, anything. By the time he was a teenager, he was reading law books borrowed from a white attorney's office where he worked as a messenger. Think about that. A black kid in the British Caribbean reading law books written by the same people who had enslaved his ancestors. Not to bow to the system, to beat it. Now here's where it gets wild, because William didn't just read those books for fun. He memorized them. And when he turned 18, he did something that should have been impossible. He walked into the Barbados Supreme Court and demanded to take the bar exam. The white lawyers laughed, literally laughed in his face. You, a black boy, practice law? But Barbados law technically didn't forbid it. There was no rule that said black people can't be lawyers, because no one ever thought a black person would even try. They assumed racism would stop him. It didn't. William Reeves passed the bar exam at 18 years old, and in 1863, he became the first black lawyer in Barbados. But this is where the story takes a darker turn. You'd think becoming a lawyer would be the happy ending, right? Wrong. Because the moment William started practicing law, the system tried to destroy him. White judges refused to hear his cases. White clients wouldn't hire him. Other lawyers called him slurs in open court. They mocked his accent. They questioned his intelligence. They did everything they could to humiliate him. One judge even told him to his face, "You don't belong here." But William didn't quit. He took cases no one else would touch, Poor black defendants who couldn't afford white lawyers, workers cheated by plantation owners, families evicted from their homes. And he won. Again and again and again. Because here's the thing about William Conrad Reeves, he wasn't just smart. He was better than them. And they knew it. By the 1870s, his reputation had grown so large that even white families started hiring him, quietly, behind closed doors, because they knew he was the best. But the British colonial government, they hated him. Because William didn't just practice law, he used it as a weapon. He challenged unfair property laws. He fought discriminatory voting restrictions. He exposed corruption in the colonial administration. He was fighting the British Empire from within. And the empire noticed. In 1878, the governor of Barbados tried to disbar him. No real reason, just racism, just power. But William fought back. He filed appeals. He wrote letters to London. He made so much noise that the British government couldn't ignore him. And then something shocking happened. Instead of destroying him, they promoted him. William Conrad Reeves is appointed Chief Justice of Barbados. Let that sink in. A black man, born into the shadow of slavery, now the highest legal authority in the colony. He wasn't just a lawyer anymore. He was the man who decided what the law meant. The same white elites who had mocked him, now they had to bow to him in court. The same judges who refused to hear his cases, now they answered to him. It was a slap in the face to every racist assumption the British Empire was built on. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. William didn't use his power for revenge. He used it for justice. He reformed Barbados's legal system. He made courts more accessible to poor people. He ruled against corrupt plantation owners in land disputes. He became known as one of the fairest judges in the entire Caribbean. Even his enemies admitted the man was brilliant. But the British colonial government had a problem. Because William Conrad Reeves was too successful, too visible, too black. And the empire was terrified of what his success meant. Think about it. The entire justification for colonialism was that white people were superior, that black and brown people needed to be civilized, that they couldn't govern themselves. But here was a black man governing, leading, outperforming white men in their own system. He was living proof that everything they said was a lie. So they had two choices: destroy him or control the narrative. They chose the latter. Now here's the part they never wanted you to know. In 1889, Queen Victoria decided to knight William Conrad Reeves. Not because she believed in racial equality, not because she was progressive, not because she cared about justice, but because she had no choice. William's reputation had grown so large that ignoring him would have been an embarrassment. Denying him would have caused an international scandal. Colonial administrators were already nervous about uprisings in India, Africa, and the Caribbean. Knighting him was a political move. A way to say, see, the British Empire rewards merit. We're fair. We're just. It was propaganda. But William knew that. And he accepted anyway. Because he understood something most people didn't. Symbols matter. June 24th, 1889. Buckingham Palace. William Conrad Reeves walks through halls lined with portraits of kings and queens. Every face is white, every statue is marble, every chandelier glitters with stolen wealth from colonies around the world. He's wearing formal judicial robes. His posture is perfect. His expression is calm. But inside, he knows exactly what this moment means. He's about to kneel before the queen of an empire that enslaved his ancestors, an empire that still oppressed millions of black and brown people, an empire built on violence, theft, and lies. But he's also about to become Sir, a title that was supposed to be impossible for someone who looked like him. The ceremony begins. Queen Victoria enters. The room goes silent. She's small, elderly, unremarkable, but she holds the power of an empire. William kneels. The sword touches his shoulder. I dub thee Sir William Conrad Reeves, Knight Bachelor. He rises, and in that moment, every rule about race and power shifts just a little, just enough, because now there's a black knight. In Britain, in 1889. But here's the part that'll make you sick. The British press barely covered it. The ceremony wasn't announced in major newspapers. No grand headlines, no paintings commissioned, no statues erected. Compare that to white knights, knighted the same year. Their names were celebrated, their achievements praised, their legacies preserved. William's knighthood? Mentioned once in a colonial report, buried in government archives. It was like they knighted him and then pretended it never happened. Why? Because acknowledging a black knight meant acknowledging that black people could achieve greatness, that they were equals, that the entire system of white supremacy was a lie. So they did what empires always do when the truth is inconvenient. They erased it. After the knighting, William Conrad Reeves returned to Barbados. He continued serving as Chief Justice. He continued fighting for justice. He continued being brilliant. But in England, his name started disappearing. History books written in the 1890s? No mention. Encyclopedias about British knighthood? Not listed. Curriculums? Ignored. By the early 1900s, most people in Britain had no idea a black man had ever been knighted. And that was intentional, because the British Empire was entering a new phase. The scramble for Africa was in full swing. Colonial administrators were justifying brutality in Kenya, South Africa, India, and beyond with the same old lie. White people are superior. A black knight didn't fit that story. So they buried him. But the erasure went even deeper. In Barbados, William's legacy was complicated. Some black activists saw him as a hero, a man who beat the system. Others saw him as a collaborator, someone who worked within a racist empire instead of dismantling it. And after he died in 1925, that debate faded. His name became a footnote, then a rumor, then forgotten. For over a century, Sir William Conrad Reeves existed only in dusty archives and obscure colonial records. The first black British knight. Erased. But here's the beautiful, infuriating twist. The truth doesn't stay buried forever. Fast forward to the 1990s. A historian in London is researching Victorian knighthoods, digging through old records, cross-referencing names. And then she sees it. A name that doesn't fit the pattern. Sir William Conrad Reeves, Barbados, 1889. She pulls the file, reads his biography, and realizes this man was erased. She publishes her findings, and slowly, very slowly, the truth starts coming out. But even today, most people don't know his name. Ask 10 people on the street in London, who was the first black British knight? Most will say they don't know. Some will guess wrong. Almost none will say William Conrad Reeves. Because the erasure worked. Even now, history isn't taught in schools. It's not in popular history books. It's not in documentaries. You have to go looking for him. And that's exactly what they wanted. So why does this matter? Why should you care about a man who lived over a century ago? Because his story reveals something crucial about how history works. History isn't just what happened, it's what we're told happened. And the people in power control that narrative. When the British Empire knighted William Conrad Reeves, they couldn't deny his achievements. He was too brilliant, too accomplished, too visible to erase completely. but they could control what happened after. They could decide not to celebrate him, not to teach his story, not to make him a symbol. They could knight him and then erase him. And that's exactly what they did to thousands of other black and brown people throughout history. The inventors whose patents were stolen, the soldiers whose heroism was ignored, the leaders whose movements were crushed, the artists whose work was uncredited. Erased, all of them. Not because they didn't achieve greatness, but because their greatness threatened the narrative of white supremacy. William Conrad Reeves is proof that the system never wanted equality. It wanted control. Even when they couldn't stop a black man from succeeding, they could stop you from knowing about it. But here's the thing. We know now. And once you know, you can't unknow. Let's talk about what William actually accomplished. Because even beyond the knighthood, his legacy is staggering. As Chief Justice of Barbados, he reformed legal procedures that had been unchanged since the slavery era. He made it easier for poor defendants to access courts. He ruled against powerful plantation owners in land disputes. He fought corruption at every level. He also mentored young black lawyers, encouraged them, told them what his mother told him. You are not nothing. Several of those lawyers went on to become judges themselves. They carried his legacy forward. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. William wasn't the only black person achieving incredible things in the 1800s. He was part of a wave. In America, despite slavery and then Jim Crow, black people were inventing, writing, leading, and building. In the Caribbean, freed black communities were forming governments, schools, and businesses. In Africa, kingdoms and empires were resisting colonization with brilliant military and diplomatic strategies. But all of these stories were suppressed, erased, buried. Because if people knew the truth, if they knew that black people were thriving despite oppression, it would destroy the lie that justified oppression in the first place. The British Empire needed you to believe that black people were inferior. William Conrad Reeves proved they weren't. So, they made sure you never heard his name. Today, there's a movement to reclaim these erased histories. Historians, activists, and educators are digging through archives, finding the names, telling the stories. In 2020, a petition was started to erect a statue of Sir William Conrad Reeves in Barbados. As of now, it hasn't happened, but the conversation is growing. In the UK, some schools are starting to include him in curriculums about British colonialism. Not many, but some. It's a start. But the resistance is real, because acknowledging William Conrad Reeves means acknowledging that history lied. It means admitting that the British Empire deliberately erased black excellence. It means confronting the fact that the same systems that oppressed people in 1889 still shape our world today. And that's uncomfortable. But discomfort is necessary, because here's the truth they don't want you to know. The empire didn't end, it just changed clothes. The same families that owned plantations in the 1800s, many of them still hold wealth and power today. The same institutions that justified slavery, many of them still exist, just with different names. The same narratives that erased Sir William Conrad Reeves, they're still being used to erase black voices right now. But here's the thing. We know now, and once you know, you can't unknow. Let's talk about what William actually accomplished, because even beyond the knighthood, his legacy is staggering. As Chief Justice of Barbados, he reformed legal procedures that had been unchanged since the slavery era. He made it easier for poor defendants to access courts. He ruled against powerful plantation owners in land disputes. He fought corruption at every level. He also mentored young black lawyers, encouraged them, told them what his mother told him. You are not nothing. Several of those lawyers went on to become judges themselves. They carried his legacy forward. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. William wasn't the only black person achieving incredible things in the 1800s. He was part of a wave. In America, despite slavery and then Jim Crow, black people were inventing, writing, leading, and building. In the Caribbean, freed black communities were forming governments, schools, and businesses. In Africa, kingdoms and empires were resisting colonization with brilliant military and diplomatic strategies. But all of these stories were suppressed, erased, buried. Because if people knew the truth, if they knew that black people were thriving despite oppression, it would destroy the lie that justified oppression in the first place. The British Empire needed you to believe that black people were inferior. William Conrad Reeves proved they weren't. So, they made sure you never heard his name. Today, there's a movement to reclaim these erased histories. Historians, activists, and educators are digging through archives, finding the names, telling the stories. In 2020, a petition was started to erect a statue of Sir William Conrad Reeves in Barbados. As of now, it hasn't happened, but the conversation is growing. In the UK, some schools are starting to include him in curriculums about British colonialism. Not many, but some. It's a start. But the resistance is real, because acknowledging William Conrad Reeves means acknowledging that history lied. It means admitting that the British Empire deliberately erased black excellence. It means confronting the fact that the same systems that oppressed people in 1889 still shape our world today. And that's uncomfortable. But discomfort is necessary, because here's the truth they don't want you to know. The empire didn't end, it just changed clothes. The same institutions that justified slavery, many of them still exist, just with different names. The same narratives that erased William Conrad Reeves, they're still being used to erase black voices right now. But every time we tell his story, we fight back. Every time we say his name, we resist the erasure. Every time we refuse to let history be sanitized, we reclaim the truth. Let's sit with some uncomfortable questions. If William Conrad Reeves was brilliant enough to become Chief Justice, how many other black people in the 1800s were just as brilliant but never got the chance? If the British Empire could knight a black man in 1889, why did it take until the 1960s for widespread civil rights movements to gain traction? If his story was deliberately erased from history, what other stories are still being hidden? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invocations to think critically about everything you've been taught. Because history classes don't usually teach you about Sir William Conrad Reeves. They teach you about white abolitionists who freed the slaves, about benevolent colonial administrators who brought civilization, about progress happening slowly, naturally, inevitably. But that's not the truth. The truth is that black people were fighting for themselves, leading themselves, governing themselves. And white power structures spent centuries trying to hide that fact. William Conrad Reeves wasn't an exception. He was an example of what was always possible when oppression didn't get in the way. You want to know what the British Empire really feared? Not William Conrad Reeves himself, but what he represented. Because if one black man could become Chief Justice and be knighted, then maybe others could too. And if others could, then maybe black people didn't need white people to govern them. Maybe they didn't need the British Empire at all. Maybe, just maybe, the entire justification for colonialism was a lie. That terrified them, because the British Empire wasn't held together by military strength alone. It was held together by a story that said, "We are superior. They need us. This is natural. This is right." William Conrad Reeves shattered that story just by existing. And the empire knew that if his story spread, if black people across the Caribbean, Africa, and beyond heard about him, it would inspire rebellion. So they knighted him quietly, celebrated him privately, and erased him publicly. It was damage control. But the damage was already done. Because William knew the truth. and he passed it on. Not in grand speeches, not in manifestos, but in courtrooms, in mentorships, in quiet conversations with young black lawyers who dared to dream. He planted seeds, and over the next century, those seeds grew. There's a reason totalitarian regimes burn books. There's a reason colonizers destroy indigenous languages. There's a reason oppressors erase names. Because names are power. When you erase someone's name, you erase their legacy, their impact, their proof that they mattered. You make it easier to pretend they never existed. And when entire communities are erased, you can rewrite history however you want. That's what happened to Sir William Conrad Reeves. His name was erased, his knighthood buried, his legacy minimized. But names have a way of surviving. Even when history tries to bury them, even when textbooks ignore them, even when statues aren't built and streets aren't named, names survive in whispers, in family stories, in archive boxes gathering dust. And eventually, someone finds them. Someone like you. Someone who watches a video, reads an article, digs a little deeper, and suddenly, the name lives again. Sir William Conrad Reeves. Say it out loud, because every time you say it, you undo a little bit of the erasure. You reclaim a piece of stolen history. You honor a man who defied every odd stacked against him. William's story isn't just about one man. It's about a system that decides who gets remembered and who gets forgotten, who gets statues and who gets unmarked graves, who gets taught in schools and who gets erased from curriculums. And that system is still operating today. Think about the history you learned in school. How many black inventors were mentioned? How many black scientists? How many black leaders who weren't just Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks? Probably not many. Not because they didn't exist, but because the curriculum was designed to center whiteness, to make you believe that progress came from white saviors, that black people were passive victims waiting to be rescued. But the truth is so much richer, so much more empowering. The truth is that black people have always been fighting, always been leading, always been brilliant. From ancient African kingdoms with advanced mathematics and architecture, to Haitian revolutionaries who defeated Napoleon's army, to hidden figures like Katherine Johnson calculating NASA's trajectories, to Sir William Conrad Reeves walking into a palace and demanding to be seen. The excellence was always there. It was just hidden from you. On purpose. Let's talk about cost. What does it cost when a story like William's is erased? It costs young black kids who grow up thinking they're the first, that no one who looks like them has ever achieved greatness, that they're alone in their struggle. It costs us all a complete understanding of history, a nuanced view of the past, the ability to learn from both the triumphs and failures of those who came before. It costs truth. And without truth, we can't have justice, because if we don't know what was done, we can't address it. If we don't know who was erased, we can't restore them. If we don't know the systems that oppressed people in the past, we can't dismantle the systems that oppress people now. The erasure of Sir William Conrad Reeves wasn't just about one man. It was about maintaining power, about controlling the narrative, about making sure that future generations wouldn't question the empire. But here's the beautiful irony. The harder they tried to erase him, the more important his story becomes once it's uncovered. Because now it's not just about a black knight. It's about the lie we were told and the truth we deserve. Now, let me tell you the part that'll keep you up at night. William Conrad Reeves isn't the only one. He's not the only black person erased from British history. There were black Tudor nobles, black Georgian musicians, black Victorian doctors, black soldiers in every major British war. All erased. All intentionally forgotten. The Empire didn't just erase William, they erased thousands, and we're only just starting to find them. But there's hope, because today historians and activists are doing the work. They're combing through archives, cross-referencing records, demanding that institutions acknowledge the truth. In 2020, Oxford University published a comprehensive database of colonial-era figures. Sir William Conrad Reeves was included. In 2021, a Barbadian historian wrote a full biography of him, finally giving his life the documentation it deserved. In 2022, a British podcast dedicated an episode to his story, introducing him to thousands of people who had never heard his name. It's slow, it's frustrating, but it's happening. And every rediscovered story is a victory. Because the Empire wanted these people forgotten, but they're being remembered. Their names are being spoken. Their legacies are being honored. And that's a form of justice. Not complete justice, not even close, but it's something. And it's more than they had for 100 years. So what do you do with this information? First, share it. Tell people about Sir William Conrad Reeves. Post about him. Talk about him. Make sure his name spreads. Because every person who learns his story is one more person who knows the truth. Second, question everything. When you read a history book, ask who's missing. When you see a monument, ask whose stories aren't being told. When you learn about the past, ask who decided what I should know. Third, support the work. There are historians, archivists, and educators fighting to uncover erased histories. Support them, amplify their work, donate if you can. And fourth, teach the next generation. If you're a parent, a teacher, a mentor, tell young people these stories. Don't let them grow up thinking history is just what's in the textbook. Show them that history is alive, that it's contested, that the truth is still being uncovered. And finally, remember this. Sir William Conrad Reeves didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for the system to be fair. He didn't wait for racism to end. He fought. He won. He left a legacy. And if he could do that in 1889, imagine what we can do now. Here's the final truth. The British Empire knighted Sir William Conrad Reeves because they had no choice. He was too brilliant to ignore, too accomplished to deny, too visible to erase completely. But they tried anyway, and for over a century they succeeded. His story became a ghost, a rumor, a footnote. But ghosts have a way of coming back. And now, thanks to historians who refused to let the past stay buried, William's story is being told. Not in grand ceremonies, not with royal approval, but by people like you, who watch videos like this, who share stories like this, who refuse to let history be sanitized. You are the resistance to erasure. Every time you say his name, you fight back. Every time you share his story, you reclaim the truth. Every time you question what you've been taught, you break the system that tried to keep you ignorant. Sir William Conrad Reeves was knighted in 1889. He walked into Buckingham Palace as a symbol of everything the empire claimed was impossible, and he walked out as proof that they lied. The empire tried to erase him, but we won't let them. So, are there any Black British Knights? Yes, there always were. They just didn't want you to know. But now you do, and that changes everything. Sir William Conrad Reeves. Say his name. Remember his story, and never let them erase the truth again.